I'm Steve Reeder, and today we're going to interview Dean Hadley, and this is another segment of Monrovia Moments, and as always is being filmed by history student and broadcast student Owen DeWeese. So my first question, as always, is what year did you graduate?
Steve, I graduated in 1975.
Okay, and the one thing that we've talked about before here is you never attended school in the 1912 building, did you?
No. My sister, who was 11 years older than I was the last of my family to graduate from there. And she graduated in '63.
And your family has a really rich heritage with Monrovia. I mean, you're connected back to one of the founders, George Hubbard, I believe. And I think
Certainly.
that you're a seventh generation Monrovian.
Right.
And one thing is, not only is your family connected to the founder, but your family also has a pretty rich legacy of having attended the West Union meeting. And
yes.
This early fall, the Monroe Township and Monrovia Alumni Association was able to get a historical marker. So being a member or having attended that meeting, what was your thoughts on the marker?
Well, I thought it was a tremendous honor. And I know that my parents would have been extremely proud, probably somewhat embarrassed, just because of their nature.
Yes.
But it was a great opportunity for the basis for our church, or the fact that our church was part of the founding of Monrovia.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, for the number of Quakers that came from North Carolina and the impact they had with the first school, the first church in the area, mm-hmm. and then the working with the Underground Railway. I mean, that is such an important part of our history, not only in the state, but locally. So it's just really a great thing that what they have accomplished.
Yes.
The other thing is you were heavily involved in multiple activities in school. And the one thing that you mentioned was you were involved in the band program. So mm-hmm. What year did you join band at Monrovia?
When the program began as fourth graders.
Okay.
And I remember we, of course, the band was highly competitive in the state marching fair, or the state fair marching contest.
Right.
And I remember as a sixth grader working all summer with the band, with the senior band, and marching in that competition. There were a few of us that were actually chosen.
Okay. So as a sixth grader, you were helping the high school band.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that wasn't unusual.
Right.
If you could read notes, blow the horn hard enough, and create some positive skills, to the band, it didn't matter, your grade level. It just really mattered whether you could march in step and stay in line.
Now, how many people do you think were probably in band at the time?
In the band, when we started, I believe that we probably marched a good 80 to 90 people, possibly as many as 100, because it was really active. When I began, I just remember it was really just part of the atmosphere.
Right.
Want to be part of it.
Yeah, it seems like band, I mean, Monrovia has really had certain programs that have just really done well. I think the band mm-hmm. program is one of those programs. Now, when you were in high school, was there a band class that you were in during the day?
Sure, music class.
Okay. So
yeah, we had, I think it was almost always fourth period.
Okay. Now, when you were in high school, where was the band room?
Located in the second floor.
Right.
I think, the farthest northeast corner of the old school building.
Now, the one thing that when I share the history of the school, the one thing the students are pretty amazed at was how the band room was upstairs, but also there was a way to get from the upstairs hallway right to the gym, was there not?
Yeah. And I couldn't point out the
Right.
way it was now.
Yeah.
But, with all the changes that have been made in the school, half the time I get lost even just trying to find my way from the gym to what was originally or what was the wrestling room.
Right.
Where
Yeah.
I came to watch the guys practice after I've moved back.
Now, so you were in marching band, and then what happened during football season? Were you still?
No, football season, well, of course, growing up, or as we grew through the program, that was the other thing that was really good about, Monrovia, that I absolutely loved the experience. When I started off, of course, there wasn't a football program in the 6th grade. And it wasn't until the 8th grade that we actually had to worry about the conflicts.
Right.
But even between, but the band director and and Coach Demas, Mr. Pennington and Coach Demas were extremely cognizant of the limited participants that you could have.
So you felt in high school that coaches were not fighting over you; they wanted
No.
you to do as much as you could.
No, to be quite honest, that I wouldn't have given up that experience for anything,
Right.
because it made me as much who I am, allowed me to
Right.
find out what interests that I had, and I didn't really realize how much interest I had in music until I got out of high school.
Right. Now, during basketball season,
Mhm.
did you guys perform at the games?
We performed at sure, if
Okay.
we weren't participating. In
Right.
fact, before, as I could remember watching in junior high, the varsity basketball players, if they were in band, would participate in some kind of halftime show at times anyway.
Yeah. So that was the one thing that's kind of interesting, was the band performed on the court at halftime. It was
Yeah.
That's a very unique thing that they don't do today, because the cheerleading and things like that, so much more of the halftime.
No, in fact, we we participated up at least I can remember 2 or 3 times. Put on a halftime show up for the Pacers
Oh,
in
really?
Market Square,
Oh, okay.
which was kind of a charge.
Right. Now, what you had told me this before, but you ended up being drum major, correct?
Right.
And just 1 year, or were you drum major for more than one?
No, just my senior year.
Okay.
And to be quite honest, I don't know what spawned that on, but I was captain of the football team. But at the same time, I just thought, well, this is something I want to do. I like being a leader.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Pennington and Coach Demas said, okay, well, want to try it, go for it.
Oh, wow.
And I did it, and Mr. Pennington, in order to work out the conflict with the football and in the winter, or I guess in the fall marching competitions, he decided to have co-drum majors.
Okay.
So myself and Tim Stewart, who is also a senior, were the drum majors all the way through summer. We practiced, and then even in the fall competition, state marching contests, we would compete, and but Fridays there was I was doing football.
Right. So the contests were on Saturdays like they are now?
Sure.
Okay. And then what award did you get in band?
Well, I received the John Philip Sousa Award, which was for an outstanding musician. I'm not quite sure whether it's just overall competition, but or competitive, because I was in jazz band and also marching band, but in my junior year I got it.
And what instrument did you end up playing in band?
Well, I started off trumpet, and I played every bass clef instrument. By the time I was done, I ended up my senior year. Well, after graduating, I was in the marching band up and through the state fair, and I played the tuba at that time because they just needed somebody to
play
the tuba.
The other thing you had mentioned is you wrestled,
right?
And now you were part of the start of the football program, but were you also basically in the start of the wrestling program at school?
No, I wish I would have started early, because the guys that were in my senior class, Steve Brady, Mark Hammer, those guys were very competitive. Joe Martin, very competitive, even though our program was so young.
Yeah.
In fact, Brady was the first to win a sectional title.
Yeah, Steve, we're going to talk more about Steve later on, but he was quite the athlete and was the first sectional champion, not only as an individual at the time, but we hadn't had a sectional championship since the 42 boys team. I mean, he was just really a unique thing at the time. Now, where did you guys practice at the time?
We practiced in, I think, what's now the lunchroom or the multi-purpose room.
Okay.
What was considered the multi-purpose room.
Okay. And then where were the meets at?
They were in the main gym.
Okay, so in the main gym. Okay.
In fact, that was something interesting that that the memory banks has brought in to focus. I remember, that wrestling was so new. Even just to the high school, obviously, but the competition was really kind of unknown, and in order to spur some more interest in the high school, to get kids more involved, we had several meets during an afternoon convocation.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
So,
okay.
And you talk about inspiring, nothing like going out on the mat, being there alone, and having your entire school standing there watching you.
Now, today, a lot of the wrestling meets are on weekends. There are very few meets during the week. Now, when you were in school...
Totally different.
Yeah.
We generally we'd always have at least one meet during the week. And then competitions on the weekend were, a holiday tournament during the wintertime, or conference tournament, that type of thing.
Now, you told me a really interesting story about your first wrestling meet and what your mom thought.
Oh, yeah. Well, and again, my parents were considerably older than most parents, to the point where my parents were grandparents' ages for most of my classmates. And they grew up with a certain perspective of wrestling. And in fact, I just kind of automatically say wrestling because that's what they thought. But the first meet that my mother came to, she asked me where the ropes were, wanting to know, expecting to come to see, like the professional wrestling.
Right.
Wrestling. Anyway.
Yeah, that was great. And then what did Gordon think about you wrestling?
He loved athletics.
Right. But he was such a basketball guy at heart, wasn't he?
He was a basketball guy. He hated to see me not play basketball just because I had grown up with all the guys that were playing, but also understood the interest that I had with the wrestling. But it was very supportive after I got started.
Now, you also played baseball, and you and I had talked a lot about baseball at Monrovia because I wasn't sure where they all played. But by the time you got in, they were playing basically where the diamond's at now, but the diamond was flipped, correct?
Yes,
So where center field's at now is where home plate was at.
exactly.
But you and Gordon had a lot to do with maintaining that field, correct?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, from the time that, as long as I can remember, from the time that field was in existence, we came up and maintained the field.
Yeah.
Now, there wasn't a grass infield. It was basically, it looked more like a softball infield because it's all dirt.
Yeah.
But yeah, from the time, and I think that really began from the time the football field and the baseball field were in existence.
And the
He
track,
I
all
came
that,
up- oh,
all
yeah.
that went in together.
Yeah, we came up and drug the field. We weeded it. We'd do line it up before the coaches began to line it.
Right. Now, you played college ball, correct?
And baseball and football.
Now, are you probably the first to play college baseball from Monrovia?
To be quite honest, I don't know. But as far as I know, I was the first to play.
Okay. And so when you played high school baseball, it was, by the time you got in, it was only in the spring. At
Right.
one point, they had fall ball, and I think Jerry Piper told me they finished that like in '61. And then originally they played in what's now the parking lot. And then you had told me something really interesting, that when they were building the high school now, they played at Gary Judson's house, or
Right.
Stanley Judson. And I just didn't know that. I thought that was just the most kind of unique thing about Monrovia, was the way the community would chip in and, well, we don't have a diamond, we'll build a diamond kind of thing.
Right. Well, it kind of falls in line with the way that the community has always supported sports. I don't know why
Yeah.
in particular it's always been important, and certainly, but to the parents that I guess had the kids at
Right.
In my age group, it just seems like there was. You want something, it was there.
Yeah.
Or we needed something, it was there, and the school didn't necessarily have to foot the bill.
Right.
But yeah, and this was, I could remember, it had to have been, I was a sixth grader or maybe seventh grader going to watch those games. And let's see, you know what? I had to have been younger. So
Yeah.
it's probably third or fourth grade.
Right. Now, the big thing we're going to talk about today is Monrovia football. I mean, that
Right.
just has such an impact on the community. And, when I do my local history presentations, I always tell people that several programs at Monrovia have been very successful, but this is a football town. And so give me a little bit of a rundown on how football got started.
Well, to begin with, all I can remember is there was a call out, said, if you have any interest in playing football, we're going to offer this as we're going to open it up to the eighth graders. I was an eighth grader, to the class of what would become the graduating class of '75. So they decided to have. And let me back up, because as seventh graders, they had flag football.
Okay.
I opened it up, and we had practice, basic kind of skills. I don't remember, we didn't have any kind of interscholastic competition, but but basically tried to gain some skills.
Yeah. So you played as seventh graders. It was flag.
It was just flag, no pads. Actually, absolutely no. We didn't even have a football field at that time.
Right. Yeah.
And
you didn't play other schools.
No other schools.
Okay.
And it was just kind of intramural, I guess,
right.
is the way it would be. And so. And really, I'm assuming that it was in order for us to build up. Heck, none of us really knew how to throw a football, for that matter. I mean, yeah, we played and watched on the football as far as on the TV, but
Right.
how you block
Yeah.
How do you hold a ball? How do you throw, officially throw a ball?
So then in 8th grade, Monrovia football starts.
Because, and there again, I think that was because of numbers. We, literally needed the 7th grade along with the 8th grade to make enough to have a football team.
Okay. And Demas was the coach all the way through, right?
First year, when we did the flag football, that was Mr. Walton.
Okay.
And then Demas came in as, once we had football.
Okay.
Contact football and competitive. Yes, Mr. Demas started us out and set in motion all the traditions that we were to have.
Right. And then, so 8th grade's your official year.
Mm-hmm.
But what I thought was interesting when I was doing the research on football is I'm going through the yearbook, and your freshman year, you're undefeated, correct?
Right.
In conference champs as WCC freshman.
Yeah.
It was amazing to me, like, your program is like brand new, but yet you were good enough to win conference.
Yeah, well, it was kind of, and again, it's kind of strange because the way it worked out, as a junior high, or in junior high, they kind of set in motion, okay, we're going to have we're going to run a wishbone offense, which makes sense because we have a lot of runners.
Right.
And, basically not a lot of skills as far as receiving. But during that 8th grade year, even though it was wishbone formation, everything was called. Right. Either a second man right or, there wasn't that read option.
Right.
And I was a running back at that time. And then the freshman year, come the freshman year, they moved me to quarterback. And then all summer we practiced, and we had our set backfield: Gary Warmoth, Doug Pryor, Sam Sisk. Warmoth was the fullback. Pryor and Sisk were the running backs, both designated right and left.
Yeah.
And we had Demas had set up steps for us to go through the progression of the way we were to run the offense. Exact line, exact measure, exact distance between each of us. And it was like it was choreographed.
Right.
From the time that we were freshmen, or at that point, then it was my responsibility just to read the defensive linemen and to learn how to react, for our offense. And
right.
Once that offense was intact and started, it was a ball of fun because we had the speed, we had power, and more importantly, a skill set that nobody can as freshmen, they couldn't figure out how to defense.
Now, the one thing that's really came across in the research is just the sheer importance of not only the community but the football fathers.
Yeah.
I mean, without those guys, it's really a slow process. So, and of course, Gordon Hadley he was the treasurer of the football fathers, but the football fathers had done several things. So, give me a little bit of insight about the concession stand.
Okay. Well, and first of all, you mentioned Gordon, Dad. And I could mention, or I will mention several names.
Sure.
Because
they all need to get credit. So please do.
I mean, Norm Pryor, who was Doug's father, Dick Harris, who was one of our kicker, Richard Harris's father, Tom Simpson. There were just, and gosh, it's not fair to leave out people, but I can't go through all of them. Jim Hubbard, there were so many. Even somebody who didn't have son in football. I seem to remember Rocky Carter's dad, Dick, doing fundraisers and helping us raise money. But to come back to the concession stand was great. Obviously, you have football, you need concessions, and it came to our attention. Gee, what are we going to do? And I think Jim Hubbard was the first one to come up with the solution. And that solution was, well, hey, we could take a grain bin, chop it down, have a cheap concession stand in no time flat. And they could put it up in no time. I mean, we literally put down the cement and had that building up. And I think, if I can remember, it was, 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was only subject to waiting for materials.
Yeah. And that's the one thing, like, that has become such an iconic part of Monrovia football. Because I think it just shows the community aspect to it. And I know that when they were going to redo part of the football field now to make it compliant with ADA, and they're going to build a new concession stand, like, the school just fielded phone call after phone call after phone call about, what are you going to do with the concession stand? Like, we understand that you can't use it, but you can't get rid of it. I mean, It's just such a symbol of, like, what the community did. And then not only was the concession stand such an unbelievable thing, but tell me the story about the bleachers.
Yeah, well, it's incredible what the football fathers, or how they got all, and you're going to have to, this will be kind of emotional, but anyway, how the football fathers, came together, created this environment where it just literally, whatever we're going to need, the thoughts were there. So yeah, and okay. The bottom line is, all of a sudden, I'm sitting there. Of course, we're doing the football field. We're laying the ground. We're laying the lines for the electricity, for the lights. And at that point, I think Indianapolis Power and Light had come in, designated where those light poles were going to be, and at that point, somebody came up with the, hey, where is everybody going to sit? And I don't know who came up with the solution, but somewhere along the lines they said, well, we've got all these bleachers, the old bleachers in the old gymnasium, that we used to play, where we used to play basketball. And the solution was, hey, we can just take those down and put them up. So that's what we did. I can remember going in to the old gymnasium, pull it down section by section, and then bringing them down on straight truck, haul them down and actually bringing them onto the field, haul them on, and then putting them back up.
Yeah.
Which the simple solution, how, I don't know how it came about, but sure enough, well, I mean, of course, the bleachers were against the wall, actually bolted into the wall to begin, or when we took them down. So, what do? Well, let's put up some poles and have each one of them represent, sit there for each of the risers.
But it's kind of interesting, like, how the Hubbard Mill is another iconic part of Monrovia, and it's connected to football.
Yeah.
The old gym is such an iconic part of Monrovia, and now it's connected to football. Yeah. It's just such an iconic thing.
I mean, it's like we had history before we even had a history.
Yeah. And then you already kind of alluded to this, but you always hear about one of the things that the football fathers and the people in the community were so proud about was how well lit the football field was.
Yeah.
I mean, they just said it was like unreal. So explain, you already mentioned Power and Light, but who was behind getting that done?
Well, Dad was in business with Bernard Shotters, who was the executive of the board of Indianapolis Power and Light. and he was in business. They were in cattle business together. Bernard owned the property that sits between 42 Baltimore Road and Henshaw.
Right.
And that section was about 200 plus acres. But anyway, they had cattle there. And Bernard was influential, and part of the reason that we have Indianapolis Power and Light mainly in Monrovia,
right,
is because Bernard. He said, we're going to have Power and Light out here. So away they went.
Yeah, which that's ironic because the high school's on Power and Light.
Right.
But the elementary, which is across the parking lot's on RMC.
Right.
It's just really kind of a unique thing.
Yeah, I don't know why. Well, I do know why it came about, and that's strictly because of Bernard Shutters and Indianapolis and his relation with Indianapolis Power and Light. But anyway, in the long run, Dad's relationship with Bernard, and and Bernard was a big supporter of sports. He loved sports. To the point where he would take Dad and I over to St. Louis to watch the Cardinals play at least one weekend during the summer, and we would. But he said, "Well, I can help out. All the guys come out." So he made arrangements. He said, "I'll set you up with lights." I think that's the way it was put up, and so basically. Once we had the lines laid, they came out, drilled, and put in the poles, and put up the lights. And I mean, when we'd go or turn on the lights, it would light up the entire town.
Yeah.
I mean, the lights are good now.
Right.
But I mean, you would see them coming from Mooresville.
Right.
It would light up. You don't need lights on the vehicles driving over here.
Yeah.
It was that ridiculous, and it was great.
Yeah.
Because it put anybody that we would play, it was daylight as far as when you're on a Monrovia field.
Yeah.
If it was no comparison to even some of the bigger schools like Avon or Edgewood or Owen Valley, who had football programs for a while.
Right. Now, the football fathers were also instrumental in getting the first scoreboard and then the locker room.
Sure.
But you guys never got the locker room because it had burnt, correct?
Right. Yeah. And to be quite honest, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know whether the school was paying for the materials. For some reason, I thought I was under the impression that the football fathers were at least helping to pay for materials to build the locker room. And it was located basically where it is now.
Yeah.
I think our industrial arts were putting it up.
Yeah.
Well, I think they were responsible. They would put it up.
Yeah.
So we should have had it opened up, I think, by our junior year. Certainly by the senior year.
Yeah.
We ended up, it burnt, and we ended up spending the entire football career in the basketball locker rooms.
Right. Now, the one thing you'd already somewhat mentioned were the traditions of Monrovia football, and like it was kind of iconic to be part of Monrovia football because of the traditions. And so, like, explain midnight practice and what this was all about.
Midnight practice. When we were, and I believe it started when we were juniors. It may have started with our sophomore class, or as we were sophomores, but certainly by the time we were juniors, the high school association said, you can start football on this day. And okay, so we would just, as in my mind, I was thinking we're going to start on this day. But, Mr. Demas, or Coach Demas, came out and said, no, we're starting at midnight. And, 12:01, and away we went. And I'm telling you, we had a crowd out there.
Right.
To watch us be introduced, to do a workout, and do a short scrimmage. It wasn't. It was contact, but more or less it was just basically, hey, here's who you're going to have representing you for this year.
Right. And then the other thing that was very unique about the impact of football was homecoming had been associated during the basketball season.
Well, sure, we did
forever.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have any choice.
And then all of a sudden, when football started, they moved it to football. And what I didn't realize is, from when football got started till about 1987 or maybe 86. There wasn't a homecoming in basketball, and then they re-added it. So now there's 2 homecomings, but it showed kind of the impact of football. And so not only did homecoming get shifted to football, but then you started to see a homecoming parade,
right?
The bonfire. I mean, it just changed everything. And I always remember, like, the Mr. Football and the previous year's homecoming queen would ride in the parade, and that's how they got to the game to crown this year's court. And so explain, like, the Mr. Football Award.
Okay, well, the Mr. Football Award, that was basically given to who the coaches and players deemed, representative of the spirit of what football should be like in, or what football representative to Monrovia. From our freshman year, all the way through, when my class graduated, Steve Brady was Mr. Football.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. He was the anchor of our line. He was just a tough nut.
Right.
And boy, I can remember when we played Avon it was certainly our senior year, but I think our junior year too. But when we played Avon, they had a big guy, 300-pounder, that stood, 6'6". I mean, he was not. You wouldn't roll him down the road. And he was a mountain and looked like a darn bear. And we've got a snapshot in my mind. I can see when we were trying to, doing some. Trying to work running plays against this guy who was the nose tackle for Avon, having him triple teamed, and when in the game against him, we're on the line, on a goal line stand, or on a goal line trying to score, and we triple teamed him trying to go up the middle, and I could see, and you could see Brady, Hammer, and Lawless trying to push this guy back, and they did.
Yeah.
And we scored 1 touchdown, and that was the touchdown
on that play.
And it was unbelievable.
Yeah, and the one thing,
but they looked like little guys
against him.
Yeah, I mean, they were blocking his tummy.
Yeah. The one thing about Mr. Football is that's the longest given award in Monrovia, because one year they have forgotten to give out the Paul Schuler Award. So the Monrovia Football Award is the longest one given, and it used to always be given on homecoming, and then now they've moved it to senior night. But Steve Brady was obviously the first one, and you've been a real instrumental part in getting him the recognition he deserves. With this year, he's inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame. So I'd like to really thank you for the work you've done on that to make sure that he's getting his due here. The last question here is...
Well, it's nice to have a representative from the original class.
Oh, it is.
Of
yeah,
football.
It's a really necessary thing. So the last question is this: any final comments you'd like to make about Gordon Hadley?
Well, as far as Dad goes, I guess I would like everybody to understand just how driven he was, for Monrovia athletics, because, he I can remember him telling me stories about as a young boy. He was tall for his age, but as a young boy, practicing basketball with Branch McCracken, and Branch and somehow John Wooden were, somewhat. Well, certainly they were competitive, but they
Right.
were also friends.
Right.
And I can remember Grandpa talking about practicing with them and learning from them. But he was driven, even as a youngster. And I think part of his dad was a semi-pro baseball player. But I think from the time that I was growing up, he kept saying, "Look, we worked hard, and he worked us hard, but he kept saying, don't be in such a hurry to, grow up. You need to play." And even to the point where he would take us over to the ball field. We'd have sandlot baseball, and get, I don't know, 9, 10 of the kids around around school, and this is when we were in Little League age, Little League, Pony League, and so we'll have an hour. Everybody meet up at the sandlot, and we'd play ball.
Yeah.
But that kind of set the competitive edge.
Right.
And then, Walt Gray was another father.
Yeah.
David Gray, but he was another father that was instrumental in just the athletics.
Yeah.
But as far as Grandpa goes, I don't know if I know he had to look at me cross-eyed when I said, "Hey, I'm going to do I'm going to be a drum major."
Yeah.
And but for whatever reason, for me to be able to take full advantage of that and have full support from him,
Right.
Was a tremendous driving factor.
Right. Well, Gordon Hadley was, when we did the Monrovia Alumni Hall of Fame, he was one of the first inaugural class for the Hall of Fame. I think it's well deserved.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that will end our interview with Dean Hadley.